Hey, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Spirit Anointed Leadership. So blessed to have you with us today. And I'm really excited that my friend Blake Hicks is with us today because we're going to talk about a subject matter that we both really care about, a topic that we're both passionate about, and that's leadership development. Yeah. But before we get to that, I want them to get to know you a little bit. And Blake, you always are like this Renaissance guy to me because you are just this amazing dude. You're a husband and a dad of how many? How many kids do you guys have?
We have 4 children.
So you have 4 children, and how many grandchildren?
7 going on 8 this summer.
Woo! Okay, so 8 Crazy. Grandchildren, and then you're a pastor. Yeah. You happen to work at the Zero Collective, and which oversees 4 churches now. And I really believe that in the future, it's going to be probably the Great Lakes Network, that we're going to be basically a region of multiplying networks. So I think you guys are on the front end of that kind of thing. But besides that, you own your own business and an ice cream business, and which is so cool. You get to sell ice cream, so everybody likes you.
Yeah, it's back when I started in ministry there, I had owned actually 4 different businesses, and then when I felt God's call into ministry, I decided, it's probably time to consolidate, and sold off the other ones. And I thought, I'm going to keep the one thing that is just brings joy. So I think Steve Jobs said, if you want to make everybody happy, don't be a leader, go sell ice cream. And so I try to figure out, okay, how can I do both? Yeah, exactly. So that's where I'm at right now. But
you're a leader who does sell ice cream.
Yes, there is.
So you see leadership from a lot of different vantage points, no doubt. Mm-hmm. And you and I have had many conversations about the fact that you were a very important layperson at a significant church here in Grand Rapids. And what's interesting about that situation is that it kind of went through its life cycle and had a huge heyday when it was the thing in Grand Rapids. And then unfortunately some things kind of went south, and so it still exists, but it's a tiny little thing compared to what it was. So you've watched leadership as a layperson, and then you went on staff at a church at Frontline. And so you've seen leadership from all different kinds of perspectives. But one of the things that I just remember so clearly, walking into this room at Frontline, I was there to preach, and there you had all these signs around the room that talked about different, if I remember right, different characteristics and different books that you wanted people to read on their journey towards leadership development. Yeah. And I thought I died and gone to heaven right there, like in that room, like, oh my gosh, there's someone else who's crazy like I am. So talk to me about what first initiated this drive in you, or this sense in you that leadership development was actually important. How did that bug in you got bit and that kind of thing? How did you go down that road?
Well, I think when I first started at Frontline, we were growing as a church, and it felt like at least every week or at least every month, I had the proverbial help wanted sign on the door. Like, we just needed a new student ministry pastor. We needed a new children's pastor. And it just was like a constant barrage of hiring. And so every week was just, hey, somebody's leaving and we got to find somebody else. And so I remember a conversation I actually had with you, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but I got to the point, it was about maybe a year past that, and it was like I had all the roles filled. I felt like I finally achieved what I was supposed to do. I got there, and I said to you, you happened to be at Frontline someday, and I said, Chris, I go like, what the heck am I supposed to do now? Yeah. And I remember you saying to me, it was like, leadership development. And that's what you said, and which is awesome. I had no idea what that meant. Wow. I really didn't have a clue. What does it mean to actually develop leaders? I've always hired leaders. I've always seen good leadership, but what does it mean to actually develop leaders? And so that kind of started me on the journey of trying to figure out, what does leadership development look like, and how can it be used in the church, especially in the context of trying to figure out team members. Because I'm part of a network of churches, and we're constantly looking for more people. And you've said this before at different events and stuff. It's like the number one problem is not money. The number one problem isn't vision. The number one problem isn't any one of those things. The number one problem is just finding people. Yep. And so as a network and as a pastor in that network, we have a lot of people sitting out in front of us every Sunday.
Yep.
And we're there. They just need somebody to have that conversation with them of what could be or what if, and to spend some time with them and develop them as a leader. And so that's the challenge I took on. And it's been kind of fun. I definitely don't do it alone. We have a great team, but it's been fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to encourage this. Some of us don't lead in situations where we've got hundreds and hundreds of people, but it really doesn't matter. If I've got 50 people, if I got 75 people sitting in front of me Sunday after Sunday, I've probably got 4 or 5 good quality leaders there. And the question is am I developing them? Because chances are really good they're not being developed other places. No one else is taking responsibility to actually develop them. Yeah. And if we take on that responsibility, amazing things can happen. Yeah. So I want to actually, this is probably not one of the questions I asked you beforehand, but who cares? You're smart enough. You'll figure this out. But talk to us from the moment that this Chris Conrad goofball says to you, well, develop leaders, until I walk into that room and you've got those. How did you go about discerning what those things were going to be that you want, those attributes, those characteristics that you wanted to see begin to be developed in those leaders? How did you come to that place? And what are some of those? What are some of the things that you want to see developed in leaders who go through the leadership development process of the Zero Collective these days? So how did you come to that place? Because that's where a lot of our pastors are. They don't have a leadership development process. They don't know how to get started. How did you get started?
Well, I mean, first getting started, you got to find the leaders, right? So it's calling them out from the church, and that can happen a number of different ways. We did that as a team, the staff involved actually, at the churches, and said to them, who in your ministry is ready to take that next step? Who in your ministry do you see that has those giftings? Who in your ministry would you be able to have a I see in you conversation? I'm sure you've talked about that, of what could be in their future. And so we actually challenged our staff for a period of time and said, who are you lifting up in that way? And we actually tied it to the part of, there was a lot of accountability with that. Every staff meeting is they had to report on who they were doing that with. Wow. And so that was part of the way we found people first. And then the other way we did actually was just within a church service. Our lead pastors at each one of our churches had a specific day where they called people out of the congregation and said, is God moving in your life? Do you feel like he's put a call in your life to step into some sort of role, either in leadership or in ministry? And so we had a bunch of people come forward in that way. So that was just a couple ways we actually got the people first doing there. But as far as the system,
content or
the content of how we're actually doing it, you know this yourself, and I know this is you can't lead anybody else until you learn how to lead yourself. Yep. And so that's where I start as far as our leadership development process. So it's split up into 3 categories. Okay. And first category is character. Okay. And so we just look at how God has created you. So we go through a bunch of different assessments, things like that, things that people are familiar with, either a Myers-Briggs, some of the other ones that are out there. But we'll do that. Spiritual pathways, how God has, how you relate to him, celebration of disciplines, some disciplines in there, just how to learn to lead yourself. So we go through that for a number of weeks there. Okay. And then from there, once we feel like we've got a good set basis of how to lead yourself, then we move into core competencies. What do you need to know in order to be in ministry, to be a leader, to work in a church. Right. And so we go through a series of those. Those are about 8 weeks, 9 weeks of those.
Do you remember any of those off the top of your head, what some of those core competencies might be?
Oh, sure. Influence, time management, conflict management. Those are just a few ones that come to the top of the head. But those are things that, if you're coming into either a ministry position or even just in leadership elsewhere, those are just good competencies just to know how to walk through with people. So, and then the last section we go through, the last section is actually culture. And so being part of a collective of churches, a network of churches, we want people specifically to know what it is that sets us apart and what's really important to us as a church and as a network. So again, we're looking at using this as, we call it launchable leaders. We're launching leaders,
right,
not only into the marketplace, but for us, selfishly, into ministries.
Yes.
Because we just feel like, again, that's our greatest need. So.
Yeah, and it's both and, right? I mean, it's, first of all, I want to give credit where credit is due. My friend Wes Smith, I think he's the one that came up with that term, launchable leaders. Oh. Then I shared it at a regional event or whatever, and you guys took it and ran with it. Praise God for that. But it's this idea of, who do I see in our congregation that is launchable? And it's, again, it's both and. It's, yes, I'm launching them into the marketplace to be who God has called them to be, but also they might end up being, in some way, shape, or form in vocational ministry, or they might take on a much more significant role as a lay person in our church. Like, all of a sudden, they're playing it, and the thing is that they understand now leadership like they never have before, and the importance of their leadership in our environment. So if I'm just attending XYZ church and I don't understand that I'm a leader, or I don't understand how I can leverage the leadership gifts that God has given me, then the kingdom of God is not going to advance as much as God wants it to advance through my local church if I'm not using my leadership gifts.
Yeah.
And so it really is up to us, those of us who are leading in the church, to develop other leaders.
Yeah, I think also, just to follow off on that point, is I think for many of us in the church world, many of us pastors, how many times have we elevated people into positions of leadership within our church, but failed to train them properly?
So true.
And then we reap the ramifications of that and have to clean up that mess,
Yes.
And it's like, oh my goodness, if we would have just on the front end spent a little time with them and said, like, hey, here, let's learn how to lead yourself. Here's what's important to us, and here's some competencies that you're going to run into.
Yes.
So that's, it's not rocket science. We're not doing anything that anybody else can't do. And you said it earlier, a church of 50, a church of 100, a church of 1,000. Man, it's doable. It's just, you've got people out there. They're just waiting. They're desiring. I've gone through this for a number of years now. The stories I could tell you of just people who have been through it, who said, man, I was just waiting for somebody to ask me.
Wow. Please let that inspire you. If you're watching or listening to this podcast, I believe with all my heart, so to speak, that there are people in your congregations right now that are simply waiting for you to invite them into the game, into being involved in ministry, into being part of the team. They're waiting for someone, and you can unlock that door for them. Yeah. Men and women, young adults and older adults, they're just waiting for someone to unlock that door for them. Yeah, and here's the thing that a lot of us do, and I was very guilty of this, is I said no for them. Wow. There was people in my congregation, or our congregations, I should say, that were like, I would think, well, he runs a business. He's already a leader. Right. Or, sometimes we as pastors too, and guilty of this, we put people in boxes and we think like, okay, well, not that person. We don't want that one. But I'll tell you what, over the course of all these years, just seeing how when somebody is just given the opportunity, when somebody points out something inside of them, and then you spend time with them developing them, just the light goes on. So I missed a really important piece of this, not on purpose, but I think it's so important, is that this is what we do within the collective and this whole leadership development. It's not just a program. It's not like, hey, do all these classes and when you get done, you're going to do that. There's a whole discipleship portion of that is actually, I would say, the key to it is not only going through, hey, this is how you lead yourself. This is some core competencies. Here's how our culture is. But it's literally sitting down with them and walking through life with them on a regular basis. So that I do, and I find as I spend time with people in that respect, all the other stuff kind of comes into focus as to that's
where
awesome.
we're going.
So there's a sense in which you're taking responsibility. And again, if I'm in a church of 50, I could do this with 3 individuals. If I'm in a church of 100, I could do this with 5 or 6. If I'm in a church of 1,000, I can do it with 10, 12, 15, whatever, with some help. But you're taking responsibility to develop them as a leader and develop them as a Christ follower.
Exactly.
And if my wife was here, if Mary was here, she would be like giving all kinds of kudos, and I do as well, because Mary loves to say our doing has got to come out of our being. Yeah. So we've got to start with the heart. And even in your training, you start with character, right? You start with, who are we in Christ? What does that mean? What are our spiritual pathways? What are the ways that we most connect with God? What are the spiritual disciplines that we need to apply to our lives? Because as we all know, Dallas Willard said, spiritual disciplines are not an end in themselves. They're designed to cause us to become more in love with Jesus. So we're asking ourselves the question, what's causing me to do that? Which may be different than what causes someone else to do that. So again, the pathways, the disciplines, they lead, this rule of life is what some people call it, lead us into a dynamic relationship with Christ, out of which then we can see played out the core competencies that God has given us. Yeah. Some of them we already have naturally, some of them we need to learn. Some of us need to learn EQ, yeah. Others of us have EQ, but we need to learn how to have perhaps a crucial conversation, or perhaps we need to learn time management, or we need to learn this. And then, so you're going down that road, but you're also checking in with them and seeing how they're doing spiritually. So it's not just what you can get out of them. Yeah. We want to take you through this process so that you can head up this ministry. It's actually caring about the individual. It's doing both and I'm so glad that you remember that, because it's those two things that go together, that what comes out on the other end is hopefully a genuine, authentic leader who's walking with Christ and who's serving in a way that's awesome. So let me just ask you, kind of as we close this time up, what have been the benefits? And we do this, for two reasons, right? I think, maybe three. A, we want to glorify God. B, we want this person to grow into all that God created them to be. And then, of course, we want to see how that plays out both in the marketplace and in the life of the local church. Yeah. What have been the ramifications, in a good way, of developing a leadership development culture throughout the Zero Collective? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just like you said, we that proverbial help wanted sign that I was talking about earlier, sticking on the door. That's not usually my go-to now. Okay. I don't do that. I mean, there's certain roles that, they're going to have to be ordained and find somebody for that respect. But, but there's a lot of roles in there where, man, maybe that'll be down the road where they could be ordained or something along that line. So instead of putting that proverbial help wanted sign out there, it's the first place I look now is my Launchable Leaders. First place we look is going like, man, we got an open children's ministry position. Man, I've been walking with this person for the last 8 to 9 months. Yes. They've got a heart for kids. I know their character now. Yes. They've got the competencies there. Yes. They have a really great grasp on who we are as an organization. Yes. Why wouldn't we look at them first? I mean, it's like, yes. And so I know, a lot of other pastors are out there going like, man, just get me a student ministry pastor. I don't, just hire them in there. They're going to turn over in 8 months to a year anyways, right? That's probably the natural trend or something like that. But what if you go on the front end of this and maybe you got somebody that's already serving in your student ministry and you have that I see in you conversation with them and then you invest in them. I mean, we found a lot less turnover just because, and the training. Man, I'll tell you that. Onboarding people like that, just because they already got an idea who we are and knowing what we're doing. So that's been a benefit. I've got plenty of stories of people that have gone through it, who we've hired, people who serve on our board, people who serve on different boards in different churches, people we've launched out into other churches that are serving right now. So it's been cool. Yeah. And one of the things I think as we close is that you also get to see the person become more fully alive. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You look at this person who, for instance, Alana, who heads up, like, for us, Alana Klopp, who heads up like our big events. She actually we got her through Frontline and Launchable Leaders and that kind of thing. And now she heads up, some of our bigger events. And I'm so blessed by her. But you see in someone like her, someone who's naturally more quiet, naturally more, laid back. And I think she's now serving on the board of
of the Zero Collective.
Of the Zero Collective. And so you get to see someone there who I think could have been a very back row person because they're naturally a little bit more quiet. But all of a sudden, you see this person grow into all that God created them to be. Yeah. And it's so stinking fun.
Well, like you said, I mean, seeing somebody, I mean, as a pastor, seeing somebody come to know Christ, I mean, that is like,
yes.
That's it, right? I mean, that's why we do what we do. That's
Amen.
the why, right?
Yes.
Everything else is just pales in comparison to that. But let me tell you, when you call out a gifting in somebody and they start seeing it in themselves.
Yes.
I mean, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's special.
And you just see them come alive and go like, oh, I mean, I could do this.
Yes.
You know, you see this in me? Like, God is actually calling me into something like this.
Yes.
When people step into those roles and I just watch them come alive, and I tell you, they come back into my office or talking to me later and they're like, I wish I would have done this 5 years ago. You know, I wish I would have done this. And really all it was an opportunity for either our team members to see somebody in our congregation, or they came forward and said like, hey, I would like to jump into something like this. But man, it's amazing. It's just an amazing opportunity to steward people well. And I think it glorifies God. I mean, when we talk about Ephesians 4:13, it's like, what is our role? It's to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry.
Amen.
Right? So this just leans right into it. This is it.
So, Spirit Anointed Leaders, I want to encourage you to think about who you should have an I see in you conversation with. I also want to encourage you to think about how I can actually take responsibility, or some folks around me and myself can take responsibility to develop them as leaders. They're waiting, they're wanting, God wants that to happen. As Blake just said, Ephesians 4:13 makes it really clear that is our responsibility. Our responsibility is to raise up people to do the work of the ministry, not to do the work of the ministry ourselves, to raise up others to do the work of the ministry. So let's go do that. Let's have I see in you conversations. Let's take responsibility to develop them. We can take them through books. We can reach out to Blake and say, Blake, help me with this. And he'll help you. And we put resources in the show notes of today that will help along those lines as well. Let's go do that. Let's be Spirit Anointed leaders who don't make a big deal of ourselves, but who make a big deal of other people. So do me a favor, subscribe, share this with someone that you know who's a great leader, who needs to develop other leaders. Do that. And then make sure you follow us as well. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's be Spirit Anointed leaders who take everything that God has placed inside of us and invest it in others so they can be all that God created them to be. Have a great day.